Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Waterfront. The title for today is How Can We Improve Air Quality in the UK? What initiatives are underway and what further action is needed? My name is Christy McHugh from Keen & Gray and I'm Chair of IAQM, the Institute of Air Quality Management. During this webinar, we'll talk about the urgency of improving air quality, how it can be done in the timeframe required, and we'll explore the latest practical solutions and measures being used to reduce emissions and improve air quality, to understand how they were implemented and the progress made, where interventions and initiatives have worked best, and where action is needed most and what's being done to ensure it is taken. So we have 4 speakers today, so I'm delighted to welcome Judith Hayton, Principal City Planner with Transport for London, Hayley Trower, Air Quality Improvement Manager, Portsmouth City Council, Ying Zhang, Strategic Development Manager, Energy and Environment Sector from the National Physical Laboratory, and Sally Jones from Bradford Clean Air Zone Monitoring and Evaluation Manager, Bradford Council. Each speaker will speak for 10 minutes, and after they've spoken, we'll have a discussion and Q&A. Please be sure to put your questions and comments in the Q&A, not in the chat function, because it's easier to keep track of them if they're in the Q&A. So I'd like to invite the first speaker, Judith Hayton, Principal City Planner from Transport for London, to present, to make her presentation. Over to you, Judith.
Hi, I'm Judith Hayton from Transport for London. I've been at Transport for London for about 15 years now, primarily working on charging schemes. So schemes such as the congestion charge, the low emission zone, ultra low emission zone, and also a bit of work on electric vehicle charging infrastructure as well, and other general environmental work primarily. So I don't know whether the slides are up now. Slides are just starting. So London does have an air pollution crisis, and this is something that's well known across the UK, and a lot of it comes to do with our dense urban environment as well. We've been in breach of legal limits for nitrogen dioxide since 2010, and the map that you can see up there in the top left shows that the highest concentrations of nitrogen dioxide tend to be really closely associated with our road network and with the densest parts of London, so central London in particular. Air pollution is a public health emergency in London. In 2016, 2 million Londoners, including 400,000 children, lived in areas that exceeded legal limits for NO2, and thousands of Londoners die prematurely each year because of exposure to air pollution. Despite significant improvements since 2016, when the current mayor was elected, and 2019, we found that toxic air is still contributing to the premature deaths of more than 4,000 Londoners. Air pollution is also a social justice issue as well. Long-standing structural inequalities in our society mean that Londoners who are poor or from a Black, Asian or ethnic minority background are more likely to live in places with the worst air pollution. And finally, in terms of the public health emergency and the air pollution crisis, some 99% of Londoners, so pretty much everyone in London, lives in areas exceeding the World Health Organization's PM 2.5 guidelines. So what are we doing to improve our air quality in London? The Mayor's Transport Strategy, the London Environment Strategy, and the London Plan all outline our plans for tackling air pollution. Around half of the NOx emissions in London come from road transport, and therefore it's right that we tackle this. We know that emissions-based charging schemes work. We've had a London-wide low emission zone. We've had the London-wide low emission zone since 2008, targeting the most individually polluting heavy vehicles. And this has been very successful in reducing particulate matter, particularly. So London now meets legal limits for PM10, and a lot of this comes from the London-wide low emission zone. In October 2017, we introduced the T-charge in the existing congestion charge zone in central London. This is a stepping stone, or was a stepping stone, to the tougher standards of our world-first ultra-low emission zone. We introduced the Central London Ultra Low Emission Zone in April 2019. It operates 24 hours a day, 364 days a year, so it doesn't operate on Christmas Day when there's not public transport alternative in London. And it requires all vehicles to meet emission standards. So diesel vehicles must meet the highest Euro 6 emission standard, and that's all vehicles, so heavy vehicles as well, cars and vans. Petrol vehicles must meet Euro 4 for cars and vans, and motorcycles must meet Euro 3. The charge level for vehicles that don't meet the emission standards are £12.50 a day for cars, motorcycles, vans and minibuses, and £100 a day for the heaviest vehicles. We've also provided support for Londoners as well in terms of meeting the ULEZ standards. So the Mayor's invested £61 million in funding to create scrappage schemes, and these have targeted small businesses, charities operating minibuses and low-income and disabled Londoners, providing help to scrap their vehicles. These schemes have been very, very successful, and they've helped replace over 11,700 older, more polluting vehicles. The Central London ULEZ has been a success. Before the pandemic, it had contributed to almost a reduction in half of harmful roadside nitrogen dioxide concentrations in the central zone, and almost a third of a reduction in particulate matter, PM2.5, and a 6% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, primarily from slight reduction in traffic. It's also been very successful in terms of reducing the number of polluting vehicles as well. So we've reduced, well, compliance has increased by some 71% since the scheme was first announced in 2017. And we now have very, very high compliance rates with the emission standards. However, air pollution isn't just a central London issue, and this is why we're expanding the ultra low emission zone out to inner London on the 25th of next month. So we also, as well, we've tightened the emission standards for the London-wide low emission zone. We tightened those in March 2021. So heavy vehicles now must meet the same standards as the ultra low emission zone across the whole of London. So some other measures that we've introduced as well to clean up our air include cleaning up our bus fleet. So the Mayor just recently announced that all new TfL buses in London will be zero emission, and there are now 950 zero emission buses on the road or on order in London. And as of January this year, all of the buses, or all 9,000 buses in our core fleet meet or exceed the Euro 6 emission standard. We've also been cleaning up our taxi fleet. So since January 2018, all newly registered taxis must be zero emission capable. And we're progressively reducing the age limit as well for taxis, or for diesel taxis. Similarly, cleaning up the private hire fleet, the minicab fleet as well, with similar zero emission capable standards. We're also seeking to reduce air pollution from other non-road sources. We have a non-road mobile machinery low emission zone, which affects construction sites across London. In addition, cleaning up air around schools in London. So since 2018, the Mayor has audited the air quality at 50 primary schools and 20 nurseries in the city's most polluted areas. And then there's also, related to that, a £1 million fund to help schools reduce local air pollution. The Mayor's Air Quality Fund as well, £22 million fund, which is available to the London boroughs for local schemes to clean up air. And we've also been expanding London's electric vehicle charging infrastructure as well. So we now have over 300 rapid charge points in London and more than 2,000 standard charging points. So with everything that we've done, despite all of that, well, so particularly the ultra low emission zone expansion and the London-wide low emission zone will lead to around 92% of London's roads meeting legal limits for NO2, but there's still more that we need to do, particularly in relation to PM 2.5, and also tackling the remaining areas of London that will continue to exceed nitrogen dioxide legal limits. And also the shift as well. The shift to zero carbon will also have significant benefits as well for London. I think that's probably enough for me. I'll hand back over to Christine.
Thanks very much, Judith. That was very interesting, and I'm sure will give rise to some interesting questions. Our second speaker is Hayley Trower from Portsmouth City Council. So over to you, Hayley.
Thanks very much, Christine. Okay, so I'm Hayley Trower. I'm the Air Quality Improvement Manager at Portsmouth City Council. I work in the transport department at the council, and I'm going to talk to you today mostly about measures that we've introduced in terms of transport to improve air quality. Next slide, please. Okay, so in Portsmouth, we've got 5 air quality management areas. They've all been declared due to high levels of nitrogen dioxide. The air quality management areas tend to follow the main routes into and out of the city. And we are a majority island city with 3 road links on and off. So you can imagine those 3 roads do get very, very busy and very congested. And that's where the air quality management areas are. Despite having the air quality management areas and the work we've done to reduce air pollution in these locations, it's not enough, unfortunately. And we are one of the lucky few authorities that were given ministerial directions from central government to reduce concentrations of nitrogen dioxide in the shortest possible time. So as part of the work to do that from the ministerial directions, we've had a look at where nitrogen dioxide comes from in the city, and obviously road traffic is one of the biggest sources in the city. We're home to the Royal Navy, we're one of the main routes to the Isle of Wight via ferry, and we've got an international port. So you can imagine there's a lot of trip attractors there encouraging vehicles into and out of the city. Next slide, please. So after having these ministerial directions, we've gone away, collected a lot of data, undertaken a lot of technical modelling to look at different measures that will be sufficient to reduce air pollution as quickly as possible to within legal limits. The 2 locations that are of specific concern are the 2 red dots there. Those are both on the A3, so one of the main routes into the city centre. So all of this work we've done to understand what's causing the high levels of nitrogen dioxide in those 2 locations have led us to the conclusion that we need to have a charging clean air zone. This was not Portsmouth City Council's preferred approach, and the politicians will tell you that, they'll be quick to tell you that. But nothing else, no other charging measures were sufficient to bring levels down as quickly as we need to. So the zone itself, it covers a small area in the southwest of the city. And what we've done, we've drawn the boundary so that it covers all of the trip attractors that chargeable vehicles need to get to. So what that means is you avoid the amount of traffic that will reroute around the zone because they've got to end up in it anyway. Next slide, please. So in Portsmouth, we're not charging all vehicles. We're doing what's called a Class B clean air zone. And what that means is we just charge the oldest buses, coaches, taxis, private hire vehicles, and heavy goods vehicles. And by the oldest, we mean those that are not Euro 6 standard if diesel or not Euro 4 standard if petrol. We're not charging private cars or vans in Portsmouth like they are doing in other local authority areas. The reason we're not doing that is because all of our technical modelling has shown that it's not required for us to do that to achieve compliance with legal limits by the end of 2022. So yeah, it's just not required. yeah, the charges there are listed. So for the larger vehicles, it's £100 a day. And for taxis and private hires, it's £10 per day. You'll notice though that, you know, this is only a small proportion of the vehicles, and whilst it's not required to charge more vehicles to achieve compliance and kind of tick that box, as it were, they only make up a very, very small proportion of the vehicle fleet. And the other vehicles are still adding to the pollution in the city. So the clean air zone is just one very small part of what we're doing in the city to reduce air pollution. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of some of the other bits and pieces that we're doing to reduce air pollution. Alongside the CAS, we've got the Clean Air Fund. So through this fund, we're giving out grant payments for vehicles that would be otherwise charged in the CAS to replace or retrofit their vehicles with Euro 6 standard. To date, the uptake's been really, really good. We've committed about £2 million worth of funding. The problem is there seems to be a shortage in supply of Euro 6 vehicles, second-hand ones, because a lot of our operators just can't afford brand new ones, particularly amongst HGVs. So although we've kind of had applications approved the grants and said, yes, you can have some money, quite a few have not been able to draw down that money because there just aren't the vehicles available. So yeah, that's quite an interesting one. We can't give the money away, literally. Traffic signal adjustments. This one, it has a small impact, but it does have an impact, smoothing traffic flow, to stop queuing, that kind of thing, just to make, yeah, to reduce the impact of idling at big signalised junctions. The Workplace Sustainable Travel Fund, I'll come on to that one on the next slide in a bit more detail. Taxi licensing, as colleagues in London were saying, we've done similar. We've updated our taxi licensing requirements so that the maximum age limit for vehicles to be licensed has been reduced. And from 2025, any newly licensed vehicle will have to be zero emission capable. We've left it, I know that seems quite a way away, 2025. The issue we have is a lot of the taxi and private hire trade are from low income groups, and to suddenly say, oh, next year you've got to buy a new vehicle is very difficult for them, even with the grant funding we're giving them. So that's why we've left it until 2025. We've also been doing an e-scooter trial to encourage modal shift away from private car, and we've had really good uptake, actually. I think it's been one of the more successful schemes around the country, particularly amongst the students in the city, so that's been good. And bus retrofit, we've upgraded 105 first and stagecoach vehicles in the city, and monitoring has shown that along the routes they travel, concentrations of nitrogen dioxide has reduced, so that's really positive. Obviously it's really hard to assert causality there, but you know, that it has gone down, which is what we wanted. Next slide, please. So yeah, I said I'd talk a bit more about the Workplace Sustainable Travel Fund. So what we've done is we've given grants of up to £5,000 per business for businesses to introduce measures for sustainable travel to and for work. So it could be putting in, I don't know, lockers and showers for people to be able to walk, run and cycle to work, or it could be pool bikes so that staff can get between sites. And this example is a company that have purchased a cargo bike with their grant, and as you can see, they've saved 3,000 miles just in a year by switching to cargo bikes for their local deliveries. So I think that's a really, really good example of how we've taken vehicles off the road and helped people to operate their businesses in a more sustainable way. We do this grant every year, and we're about to launch it again for the coming year as well. And the next slide, please. And finally, I mentioned that although a lot of nitrogen dioxide in the city does come from road traffic, we know that about 8% of nitrogen dioxide emissions in the city are from domestic heating. So my colleagues in the energy services team have been working hard to launch this programme called Switched On Portsmouth, where they give free and reduced price sort of energy devices, so air source heat pumps, insulation, solar panels, and they're also there to give free advice and help to people as well. And the monitoring for 2020 to 2021 have seen huge reductions in carbon emissions, in particular of around 400,000 kilograms, which is really good going. We don't measure the impact on nitrogen dioxide on its own for this, but obviously there are likely to be benefits there. And that's it from me. Just a quick roundup of what we're doing in Portsmouth, and just to let you know that there's more to it than the CAS. On the next slide, we've just got some, the webpage and email address if you'd like any more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hayley. That's great. I'm looking forward to questions on these as well. So our next speaker is Ying Zhang from the National Physical Laboratory. Over to you, Ying.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I'm from National Physical Laboratory. Monitoring and understanding the air quality is a key fundamental for planning and deciding improvement actions, as we have seen in the first two presentations. But today I'd like to share a perspective from measurement science in terms of forward trends and what measurements are likely to be required. Firstly, next slide, please. Firstly, for those who have not heard of NPL, just a brief introduction. So NPL was founded over 120 years ago. We are UK's national measurement institution. We hold primary standards for SI units. There are about 800 specialists in measurement science on site, and we also have state-of-art laboratory. As we are a government-owned organization, our advice is always impartial and independent. In terms of air quality measurement science, NPL has been involved in this field for over 30 years. Our main areas of work include, firstly, validate, assess, and calibrate measurements and instruments. So NPL, we operate 3 of the UK's air quality networks: particles network, black carbon network, heavy metal network. We are responsible for quality assurance audits of AURN. We also provide expertise in LAQM and UUNN. We also develop new methods or techniques. For instance, we have conducted a cabin air quality study recently. We were also one of the partners in Breathe London pilot project, where we did the low-cost sensors co-location study. Supporting EU standards and regulation development is another important part of our work. We are on a number of working groups. And for instance, NPL is a member on the work group 42, which is developing a technical specification for the evaluation of low-cost sensors. As we are the national laboratory, all our measurements are traceable to national standards and SI. Next slide, please. So what are the forward trends and measurement requirements and we're anticipating? So we've been looking at it from a number of lenses. Firstly, it's very much about people and society's awareness and expectations on air quality is increasing all the time. So with this, and we have seen a number of market reports forecasting a globally at least 5% increase each year in the next 5 years in terms of demand for air quality monitoring. But if we look at a slightly longer time horizon, we believe the number of the requirement for air monitoring stations will first increase in the coming years. But then as the air quality improves, the number of stations could be decreasing. But nevertheless, in terms of measurement requirement, we do see low cost and high performance devices will be in high demand in the coming years. But because of this increased awareness and expectation, people could be looking at new ways of measuring new areas from air quality measurement. For instance, to measure personal air quality exposure. The homes might want to have own air quality measurement, or even all the businesses. Therefore, we could be looking at mobile sensors and more flexible measurement setups. And also because of this increased awareness, people will expect better understanding of the source of pollutants. So these will require continued development of isotopic ratio measurement to understand the source. The second lens we've been looking at is the pollutants itself. As the air quality is improving, obviously the level of pollutants is reducing, and the new low limits are going to be set over time. But this presents more challenge, a bigger challenge in terms of measurement, because the low level reduced uncertainties will be required, and new technical standards need to be set. Another area for the pollutants is we see the composition of pollutants are evolving. For instance, with the change of from fuel vehicles to battery vehicles, and this will require the accurate measurement of new composition of pollutants, and also using chemical speciations to understand the content of PM. Next slide, please. And then we look at the technology development itself. And as we mentioned earlier, the low-cost sensors and compact devices monitoring multiple pollutants, there's increased demand for these kind of new sensors and new devices. And however, although the cost is lower, the measurement accuracies are still also lower than the reference instrument. So this presents a challenge in terms of the measurement, and how can we calibrate, assess, validate, and calibrate these low-cost instruments against the reference instrument in an effective and efficient way, so that more users can use these new devices. And the data collection and processing also have come a long way over the many years, over the last few years or many years. And so now that we are able to collect the data with high spatial and temporal density, so again, it present the challenge in terms of data accuracy. We have larger amount of data. How can we have a more effective and efficient method to quality control and quality assure this data, and model the data so that they generate meaningful trends for the users. And another area of technology development is the use of satellite and drone and remote sensing to monitor air quality. So these technologies, they complement the ground level measurement and provide more spatially explicit information, and allow us to sometimes forecast the trend of air pollution events. So this technique will bring the benefit, provide more information, and continued development is expected in this area. The final area, final lens we've been looking is more, it's a bigger picture. What's happening in the world. So for instance, the pandemics in the last 18 months. certainly brought more focus in terms of indoor air quality. And there's more research looking at, for instance, the airflow dynamics in terms of air exchange between indoor air and outdoor air, just to allow us to have better understanding the indoor air quality. And another big theme, of course, is the climate change and the ambition to achieve net zero. So what are the interactions between the greenhouse gas emissions and the air pollutants? How they interact and affect each other. So it's really that's a short summary. It's really from NPL's point of view, we believe continual development in measurement science is required and is critical in improving air quality. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Ying. That was a very nice forward view, very topical, and also a forward view. So thank you very much for that. So our final speaker before we get on to the discussion and Q&A is Sally Jones from Bradford Council. Over to you, Sally.
Good morning, everyone. Hi there. I'm here today to talk to you about our clean air zone work in Bradford. And my role is to monitor and evaluate the clean air zone itself. If we could have the next slide, please. So I'll be talking to you about why we need a clean air zone, where it is, which vehicles are affected, a bit about our grants and support packages, and how we're publicising the clean air zone, because it's been a really important issue for us. And my favourite bit, the health impact assessment of the clean air zone. Next slide, please. So why do we need a clean air zone in Bradford? We've got some really high traffic levels in Bradford, and we seem to have quite an older fleet as well compared to other cities, probably because Bradford's not the richest city, and it could be that some of our local fleet's older than it might be. If you look at this graphic here, you can see modelling work that we've done. Anything in red is over the legal limit for nitrogen dioxide. We did see some reductions in this during COVID, but what we're finding now is that traffic flows are actually higher than they were before lockdown. And we think this is due to people not using public transport as much, and also a lot more home deliveries. So the air quality monitoring data we've got so far this year shows that we've got a large amount of exceedances of the legal limit still. What we've modelled is that the clean air zone will mean that we meet legal limits across the whole district. And we also have found that our health data indicates that we should see a significant positive impact if we reduce air pollution. Next slide, please. So what will it achieve, the clean air zone? So you can see from this map that it's a large clean air zone. Similar to Hayley's, we really wanted to avoid people just driving around it. So basically, if you want to get into Bradford, you will need to have a cleaner vehicle. It does actually extend up a corridor into Saltaire and Shipley. That's the sort of top of the clean air zone there. We've got some particular problems up that corridor, and we wanted to make sure that we were properly controlling air pollution. So the top graphic, the green one, shows you the reductions we expect to see in nitrogen dioxide. Sorry, it's not terribly clear, but what I can tell you is the darker green areas are where we will get the biggest improvement, and that's sort of up to a 35% reduction. But what you can see is we actually get an improvement across the whole district. The graphic at the back shows our income deprivation quintile. So what you can see is even in the areas that are outside of the clean air zone, the most deprived areas are seeing the most benefit. And that's a really good thing for us in terms of health inequalities in Bradford. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows you a link to, if anyone's interested, the ministerial direction that was served on Bradford following our final business case. And the ministerial direction directs us to implement a Class C charging clean air zone to bring forward compliance to 2022, similar to Portsmouth. Next slide, please. So this shows you a graphic of the clean air zone area, and as I explained, there's that corridor as well that's also included, and it includes the outer ring road of the city itself and everything inside that, because we had air pollution problems on the actual ring road. So where other cities have been able to use their ring road as kind of a diversion around their clean air zone, we unfortunately didn't have that option, because that would have caused more problems in areas that have got exceedances and a lot of people living in them. The clean air zone will come into operation in January 2022. Next slide, please. So this just shows you a bit of information around the different types of vehicle standards that we've got. Because it's a Class C, we're including vans and minibuses as well, in addition to the restrictions in Portsmouth. So all our heavy goods vehicles, coaches and buses are included. Our taxis aren't on here, but the taxi standard, that's where the C+ comes in. So we've had to come up with a higher standard for taxis. They're over 10% of our traffic movements in the centre of the city. And we have a Euro 5 petrol hybrid standard for private hire. So they're a vast proportion of our taxis. There are a smaller number of hackneys, and we've got a Euro 6 diesel standard for those, because they don't really have the hybrid options. Those taxis, we're hoping that 25% of those will move across to electric, and we're incentivising that through higher grants for those vehicles. If we could have the next slide, please. So this is a bit of a busy slide. This is a lot of work that's going on at the moment, our Clean Air Support Programme. We were awarded over 30 million through the Clean Air Fund. And as you can see, we've got a large amount of money to dish out to all those different sectors. The largest ones being the supports for taxis and light goods vehicles, the vans. And those two funds are very busy work at the moment, because there's a lot of vehicles involved, but they're both over 10 million each. One of the things that we modelled was that over 90% of the vehicles coming into the city are actually from outside of Bradford. So what we did was we developed an exemption programme for our smaller businesses, which allows up to 3 vehicles per business to be exempt from the charges. We did this because the problem's coming in from outside as well, and we didn't want to clobber completely our own businesses, especially the smaller ones that are struggling as it is. So what we're finding so far, though, really encouragingly, is that they're applying for the support and looking to upgrade their older vehicles and move forward and get cleaner vehicles themselves. So that's really encouraging. But they do have that fallback position of allowing a few exemptions within each business if they need it. We've also got exemptions for all the standard things that the government allow. And as Hayley mentioned, we've got that issue of delivery times for new vehicles. So what we're having to do is allow them sunset periods where they wait for their new vehicle to come and aren't charged within the clean air zone. How that will affect our compliance will be interesting, but there's nothing we can do about that. The vehicles just aren't available, and we can't shut these companies down while we wait. Please could have the next slide. So publicity, this is a major issue, I think, for clean air zones. There's no national campaign for this. Obviously, we can advertise as much as you like in Bradford, but as I mentioned, 90% of our traffic's coming in from elsewhere. So we've got a real problem with letting people know about this. People don't tend to read papers anymore, and it's really difficult to reach people. The algorithms on social media tend to be set up for what they're already interested in, which might not necessarily be a clean air zone. And we have had trouble, but we're doing what we can. We've got a major billboard and poster campaign underway at the moment. We're working with the Highways England to get signs on the motorways and out at the service stations that lead into Bradford. We've got radio adverts, the social media I mentioned. We've done a lot of direct communications with local businesses, but it is the businesses outside that we're a little bit concerned about. Their level of knowledge of it seems to be quite low when we've surveyed them. The next slide, please. So this is I've got 3 slides now just to give you some of the images that we're putting out on the billboards. So the first set we did earlier in the year, just to kind of raise awareness that it's coming, with health messages alongside. So if you see in that bubble, we've about 6 of these with some really key health messages to try and get our public on board and explain what we're doing and why.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Sally. I love those graphics, especially the one about the pollution here is 38% over the limit, but you can't see it. That helps bring it home. So if I could ask all the speakers to turn on your video and be ready to come off mute. We'll start tackling some of the questions. Let me tell you what I took away from some of these talks, which you may disagree with. I think Judith said charging works and scrappage works, and you're looking forward to 92% compliance with NO2. By which sort of date was that, Judith?
So we're looking at, well, that's on roadside.
Yes, yeah.
Percentage of roads. So that's by the end of 2021.
Okay.
By the end of this year, effectively, with both schemes in place taking into account pre-compliance.
That's great. And Hayley, you're bringing in the charging CAS, which wasn't the preferred option, and you've emphasised CAS is just one part of the solution. Ying had, I think you told us that low-cost sensors are definitely part of future, and there might be some new pollutants to look out for. And Sally, you've made that link with the direct link with the health, and these changes are going to improve air quality across the whole district and make the greatest benefit across the most deprived areas, which has to be good. So let's get on with the questions. Let me go to a quick one first that caught my eye about gas. Mike Southcombe says, free gas central heating in Portsmouth. I thought we were getting rid of this as part of the climate change strategy. Is there a quick reaction to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. That's more of an issue about fuel poverty. So part of the Switched On Portsmouth project is about helping people in fuel poverty to be able to afford electricity and to afford heating, because we know that gas central heating can be a lot cheaper than electric.
Thanks. And would you like to, then we've got another one about Switched On Portsmouth from Kevin O'Brien Wheeler. How widespread is the Switched On Portsmouth scheme, and is provision of the solar panels, air source heat pumps, insulation, etc., means tested?
Yeah, most of it is means tested. There's more support available if you're on benefits, if you've got a low household income, that kind of thing. So yeah, they do look at that.
Okay, thanks. We'll come back to some of these. I'm just going to jump around at the moment. Here's one for Ying. Small novel air pollution monitoring devices, given issues with their accuracy and precision, are they a help or a hindrance?
Very good question. So I'll say, in short, I'll say it is a help. However, they need to be used with caution. So what I mean is these small devices, they certainly provide some more. First of all, it is a cost saving, but also provide more information because of their lower cost. They allow the users to install more of them in different locations. And you also get the data in real time. So therefore you get more data. So sort of high spatial density, spatial and temporal density, more data in different locations and more frequent, and give us more information. However, it's important when we use them, they need to be calibrated and through ideally co-location with a reference instrument before they are being deployed. So yeah, so in short, it is a help, but it needs to be used with certain procedure and to make sure the additional data generated are of good quality.
Thank you very much. We'll go back to the start. Nick Bennett has a couple of questions that I think might be for possibly for everyone except Ying, because they're about implementation. What are the main obstacles to changing the taxi fleet to EV, cost of vehicle, where and when to charge, and how have you overcome them? Are the drivers embracing it? And you might want to discuss whether the various interventions are evaluated for cost effectiveness. But first of all, the taxi fleet. Judith, do you have any thoughts on taxi fleet? Your taxi sounds sorted.
So not quite sorted yet. So our taxi fleet is, well, it was around 20,000 black taxis, and we're up to about 4,000, a bit over 4,000 zero emission capable taxis now. So we've still got a long way to go. So we introduced the zero emission capable licensing requirements in 2018, and alongside this we introduced a delicensing fund as well. So taxi drivers of older, more polluting diesel taxis could get payments of up to £10,000 to scrap that taxi. And then on top of that as well were the government plug-in car grants for new taxis too, which I think were up to £7,500 off the price of a new taxi in 2018 and when they first came out. So they have been successful, but the vehicles are still expensive, and there is still some hesitancy from the taxi trade in terms of the cost. The main issue the taxi trade had, as well as the upfront cost of the taxis, was to do with charging infrastructure. So we have 300 rapid charge points in London, and a proportion of those are restricted to taxis only.
Thanks very much. Hayley and Sally, Sally, you did mention EV electric taxis, and Hayley, you mentioned the fact that a lot of taxi drivers are from lower income groups. Do you have any thoughts about these?
Yeah, we've struggled a little bit. Our modelling showed that we needed a quarter of our taxis to move across to electric to get where we need to be. So we've been incentivising them. We've given them a higher grant. However, we are having to look at that again. We need to increase it more. So that's what we're currently looking at the moment. We're awaiting a decision on that. We've put in over 20 rapid chargers with the electric. It's currently free from those at the moment, and we're still not getting the interest that we would like to see. And I think it is that upfront cost of these vehicles being prohibitive. So that we can't make them cheaper, but we can help them more. So that's what we're currently looking to do. Work in progress.
Thanks. Hayley, any thoughts?
Yeah, much the same. A lot of the drivers in the city are not interested in electric vehicles at this point in time. a lot of them say, oh, what about all the airport runs I do, which I think are very rare, but they've got range anxiety, basically. They're not ready for it.
Yeah, thanks. And would you like to, Judith, Hayley and Sally, have you got any comments on whether your interventions, probably Hayley and Sally, are your interventions evaluated for cost effectiveness?
Yeah, they are to an extent. We do a lot of work about distributional impacts, and will it enable us to achieve compliance quickly as possible by helping the lowest income groups. So yeah, all of that is looked at, and we have to submit all of that to DEFRA as part of our full business case, and they've got independent panels that review all of our calculations and everything to check that it will deliver value for money.
Just to say, I can't agree more with Hayley how thorough the process is that these clean air zones are looked at under. We've got a deep dive evaluation going on in Bradford, and additionally all the work with Born in Bradford as well, and they've picked up on cost benefit analysis, looking at savings in health costs as well, actual health costs, so adding all that into the mix. When the direction was served, it was clear that cost benefit, that wasn't an option. We just had to achieve compliance, but we are of course looking at that and doing it in the most cost effective way that helps those that need it most.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the health costs are often ignored, aren't they? We've got Anonymous about Portsmouth, surely getting all polluting vehicles, including private cars and vans, to achieve compliance is the right thing to do, and something that will be required in the future, not just targeting vehicles that allow Portsmouth City Council to meet its required limits.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And it's a bit of a quirk of the way the Clean Air Zone framework is set up. So we can't pick and choose which vehicles we charge. The classes of Clean Air Zone are set. And because our modelling has shown that a Class B works, i.e. we don't need to charge cars and vans, the authority are able to say, okay, yeah, we don't need to go any further. And because central government are funding it, their agreement is that we will fund as far as you need to get compliance. That's what the interest is in. But I completely agree with your point that it would be better to charge all vehicles because we'll get there quicker, but that is not the exercise we're undertaking with the Clean Air Zone.
Thanks.
Just to confirm that from sort of a climate change point of view, we did discuss sort of nudge economics and how actually charging a small amount to car drivers would really help, particularly the SUVs coming into the city. And we've got a lot of urban SUV driving going on, so that these cameras once in place are something that could be used to tackle that kind of thing.
So was the conclude, because in fact one of the things I was thinking to myself is once you're a car driver and you've sunk your money into a car, I mean last week I paid £3.50 to get a bus 2 miles. Once you've bought a car, you're not going to cough up £3.50 to go 2 miles on a bus, are you? So was your conclusion that nudge economics could work?
Yeah, because it adds to the cost and the hassle, and it's not only that, it's around behaviour change and making it seem unacceptable. I think a lot of these things over time are about perception, and the seat belts, drink driving, all those things. Once people start to get the idea that it's not the right thing to do, it does gain traction and public support. So we felt that was a really key part of it. At the moment, we haven't quite got there yet. Nobody looks if you turn up to a school in a huge diesel, and no one seems to notice, but I think it is starting to get through.
Okay, that's interesting. Great, thanks. I have a question for maybe Ying first and then Judith from Nick Bennett. In that, Ying, you mentioned new pollutants from electric vehicles, but this is also about PM. Nick Bennett, is there a risk of EV vehicles becoming the new diesel with regard to additional PM from brakes and tyres due to their weight? Or do you think technological solutions like regenerative braking will make this a non-issue? Do you want to say anything about pollutants from EVs, Ying?
What we found is they're different. The PMs from the electric vehicles, from the brakes, they are different from the diesel. So it's evolving, and therefore we see this more research is ongoing to have better understanding of these pollutants.
What new pollutants should we look out for?
They are PMs, but perhaps they have different compositions. That's why we need the chemical speciation to understand and analyze them.
Okay, you don't have an idea yet what that
Yeah, not
yet. Okay, thanks.
Right.
Judith, you did mention PMs and you mentioned a 30% reduction. Do you have any thoughts about the role of EVs?
Definitely, and it's something that we're very aware of. So the proportion of particulate matter from tyre and brake wear is increasing as we've controlled emissions. So proportion from emissions goes down, proportion from tyre and brake wear goes up. And it's a realisation in London that the main way we can deal with this is really through reducing vehicle kilometres. So, I mean, at the base of the Mayor's transport strategy is the 80% mode share, 80% sustainable, efficient mode share by 2040. So up from around 68% now. So really encouraging walking, cycling, public transport use rather than car use in particular, but also looking at how we reduce overall vehicle kilometres driven as well, which will be the key thing that will reduce PM 2.5 from tyre and brake wear. I mean, there may be technological advances too, but overall, really we need to address vehicle kilometres and excess vehicle kilometres.
Thank you. I want to get in, Mike is typing in the chat. Sally's responded, thank you. I've got a couple of questions from Andy Bean. What legal devices have you used to satisfy grant application for vans? For example, align with the subsidy control regulations? Anyone want to answer on that? Would that be Hayley and Sally? And maybe Judith as well? Any views on that?
Is Mike's question about state aid?
Oh, so this is Andy Bean. What legal devices have you used to satisfy grant applications for vans, for example, align with the subsidy control regulations?
Yeah, so what we've had to do is limit the amount to make sure that it doesn't exceed the limits for that within the application, but also to get them to state any other subsidy support that they've had as a business. We've sort of passed the onus on that to the business itself, because obviously we can't check all the other funding they've had, but it is an issue when we've sort of calculated the maximum number of vehicles that can be funded. To be honest, a lot of ours are small businesses, so it's not really been an issue, but it can accumulate across 3 years, and we have had to look at that really carefully.
Okay, thanks very much. Maybe Hayley, if I could give you Andy's other question, which may be our last, looking for direction from Waterfront. Have any of the CAS studies taken account of vehicle displacement to other locations? You did mention that, as fleets are moved elsewhere, i.e. where there are no CAS restrictions.
Yes, so as part of our modelling, before we decide to go ahead with the CAS, that's one of the things that we all look at, all CAS authorities. We look at what impact will it have on diverted traffic, and then we have to look at the zone to make sure we're not going to divert, get vehicles to divert around the CAS. But I think you might be asking about people moving their fleets around, perhaps. So yeah, in Portsmouth, we're not at the stage yet to start seeing that, but we are aware some of the bus companies, for example, are talking to us about shuffling their fleets around. So certain bus companies operate both in Portsmouth and Southampton. Southampton are not having a CAS, but we know they've got air pollution problems. So yeah, that's conversations we're having with the operators and colleagues in Southampton to make sure that we don't just shift the problem up the M27. So yeah, definitely one we're thinking about. Yes,
unintended consequences. Thank you very much. I think we need to end now. So there's a few questions unanswered. I'm sorry for that. I'd like to thank all of the speakers. Thank you so much for your time and for your interesting presentations and for answering the questions. Thank you to everyone who attended, and thank you very much for Waterfront for hosting. I believe now it's the end of the webinar. It's going to end very quickly and chuck everyone out. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.